Hello and welcome to today's video. I'm Golden Gad. If you haven't met me before, I do some esports content with League of Legends as well as One Piece TCG content for the most part here on this YouTube channel. So today we got a very highly anticipated video with the Oden Decklist for EB02. A lot of people have been asking about it from me because I did end up winning a store treasure cup with it, and I actually ended up going to another one today, and I ended up getting second place, which earned me yet another one of those pudding prize cards, which I'll show you in just a second here. But you know, there will be a deck list, there will be a discussion here on what options I chose and why I chose them, and I'm going to kind of break down the list as it goes. And why did I pick Oden? Why do I think it's a good look here for EB02? I know it's a shorter format, so we're actually getting towards the tail end here, last couple weeks before OP11 fully releases on June 6th. But hopefully this allows you guys to have some fun with Oden for the next couple weeks. I know it took me a bit to get through to this, but some IRL stuff I had to handle. Either way, let me get off to showcasing these cards. First, I'm going to actually show you something I picked up recently just because I like to do this every single video, at least when I have the time. And this time, it's all these Japanese second anniversary cards. Absolutely freaking stunning, by the way. The texturing, you need to see these in person and hold them in your hand. It is actually insane, the layering and stuff like that. Very, very beautiful cards. Especially this one. I love this one. It's not a very playable card since it's just search Straw Hat Crew, but trust me, great card nonetheless. And then we got a couple more here. The nice thing is, if you have a binder that accommodates 9 cards per page, this is perfectly 9, so you actually can, get through to it. Next, we have, of course, my 2 puddings here, just to show I have them. Here they are, my 2 puddings. This is the one I got today, and this is the one I got about a week ago. And both of these were pretty tight matchups, where I'll show the matchup spreads when we get there, when I talk about my wins later, and like how it kind of happened. But just know, was able to secure these 2, and looking pretty right there. Maybe ready for Charlotte Katakuri next set to be able to actually play that in that list. But either way, let's get straight into this one. So obviously, this is Oden. This is my boy. Let me read you guys this leader effect, because I know some people haven't really played against Oden much. He is a more recent leader to kind of come into the meta a little bit, just because of the new addition of his EB02 improvement with that Yamato getting added into his kit. So all of your Land of Wano type character cards without a counter, so of any bricks that are Land of Wano type, can actually be pitched for 1k counter. Extremely powerful effect. It means you get away with using a lot more of these very powerful vanilla stat line bodies because they don't have any counter. So it's actually really solid for being able to swing 7 very often, which you'll see is extremely important in this meta. And on top of that, Dawn times 1 when attacking. If you have a Land of Wano type character with a cost of 5 or more, this leader gains 1000 power until the start of your next turn. So until the start of your next turn means you are a 6k defensively and you're swinging 7 when you got that Dawn attached. So just based off of that fact alone, it means you have a decent green-purple matchup. Being able to be defensively a 6k means that no matter what, you should be able to just counter 1 unless they attach more Dawn over. And that means also they're 7, so their Sanji Pudding, who usually swings 7, that's just a 2k away to be able to actually counter out of that. Another great look there, and that is kind of the pillar of the meta, considering Oden is kind of anti-meta in my opinion. I think he does extremely well into the field, and you'll see that in just a little bit. But let's get straight into it. We're going to start with what I usually start with, which is matchups. You can skip to the deck list. I don't really mind, but I have a lot of thoughts about this leader just because I've been practicing it a ton, just trying to get good before my treasure cup next weekend. And I'll surely report out on that on Twitter. So please check me out there if you want to keep up with the Oden progress. But sometimes there's just some rough matchups, so I'm going to have to hope I high roll some matchups in that next one. But either way, let's get straight into it here with the matchup chart. But first, we're going to go for a quick explanation here on why Oden. So I think he has a great matchup spread. I think he beats GP, Blackbeard, Vegapunk, Reiju, Usopp. Vegapunk I'm a little bit pulled back on a little bit. I think I've played it enough to where I'm kind of thinking Vegapunk maybe is more 50-50. If Vegapunk sees some really good triggers, you could lose the game off of that. But Usopp, Reiju, Blackbeard, and GP Luffy all feel good for Oden. And then we 50-50 for Shanks and Pluffy, which I feel like even if Pluffy's a little less prevalent, you'll still see him from time to time. So being able to 50-50 that much. And then Shanks, which is another one of those pillars of the matchup. Triangle. that this format is. I'll show you in a second. Definitely a great sign there. So he has a good matchup spread in that way. He also isn't fully dice roll reliant. Yes, you do prefer to go second. That's a fact of life, but it's not end of the world if you go first. You could still squeak out victories, and maybe you're just slightly slower, but even then, if you still see your EZO on 5, it doesn't matter as that much, you know? It's still definitely going to be a very good. I think he's extremely consistent, at least with the build that I built out. I think my build is extremely consistent. It's a little bit different than what other people are actually building out, so I think definitely worth checking out my list and trying it out. I think it'll be a little bit different than some of the Oden gameplay that you've seen with super aggro or super control-y with stuff like Rayleigh. And then obviously he's a 6k defensively, and he also has access to the most disgusting card, which is Hody Jones. I generally think of Oden kind of like a red leader that just so happens to have access to Hody Jones, which just generally makes him very good into the meta because he gets to tap down Dawn, which against any Gum Giant leader, definitely a very powerful effect. And with other leaders running more counter events, like Shanks is back to running Rad Beam again, so being able to tap down Dawn has just become more prevalent as it's gone on. Big downside is you do lose pretty hard to NL and Lucci, like very difficult matchup, and then Bonnie. I'd say it's like a little bit losing, but we'll get it right up into this matchup chart now. So here's my matchup chart. Obviously we got Oden at the top, the dodge these tier right after below that, so you don't really want to see these in bracket. You got playable where you can play it out, not favored, but if you high roll, they low roll, you'll probably end up taking it. Even / coin flip, so some of these are legitimately coin flip and some of them are legitimately 50-50 skill checks, I think, where you're just going to need to play it out, it's going to grind out, and you're going to need to really adapt to your opponent. And then there are some that are winning as well on the bottom here. So Oden, obviously I'm going to be a little bit more optimistic than maybe some other people are on this leader. I did put him, if you checked out my last video for the tier list, I did put him in the top 12 at number 12 because I think his matchup spread is so good, he really can do damage in this meta. So either way, we're going to start from the top with the dodge these tier. I think this is a pretty simple to understand 4 leaders here. So we got 3 black leaders that just focus on removal. That's tough. Okay, you need your bodies to stick so you can get the 1k bonus from your leader effect. If you don't have the 1k bonus from your leader effect, you might as well not have a leader effect. So with Lucci, Smoker, and Moria being so difficult, definitely that's something that you're just going to have to deal with. Today I played against a Lucci, and unfortunately I just had to sit it out, and I tried to grind down to the point where he was at 0 life, and he just barely had enough counter to be able to get out of it, and I felt like I played that as well as I could have, and the Lucci kind of low rolled a little bit, but just had a lot of counter, and I ran out of steam. So just difficult matchups because they can remove your 5 or 6 costs pretty freely, and especially with them teching in stuff like 10-drop Kuzan, all your 5 and 6 drops are now either 0 or 1 cost, and they'll just get popped immediately. And then NL, I think, is pretty simple. The addition of Damned Punk from OP10, I think, has kind of changed this matchup where Oden cannot go fast enough because now you're teching. You know, before Gadatsu was actually out of range at 4 to actually be able to hit your 5 drops. But with the Damned Punk, I know this is like completely different, but with Damned Punk now you can run. You can either find a Damned Punk or a Nami. That's 8 cards in your deck. That you can just pop your 5, like Oden's bread and butter cards for. And you know, especially if NL goes second, he can go Damned Punk into Shirahoshi on 6, and that is really bad because if Oden can't take NL down to about 2 life with like 2 to 3 bodies on board, you're probably not winning that game, and he's probably going to stall you out to the point where he has multiple 10 drops and it's going to be over. At that point, you're wishing that, maybe he just doesn't have the counter in hand, and I can Hody Jones whatever trigger blockers he gets out of life. Very difficult matchup. Don't recommend playing it out. It actually does suck a lot. If you can't kill him in 5 turns, you're probably toast. Then we move on to the playable tier. So these ones is a pretty interesting mix. So Bonnie, I think I'll start with, just because she's one of the people I put in the top 5 leaders in my last video, where I said the top 5 were GP Luffy, Shanks, Lucci, Teach, and Blackbeard. Those were my top 5. Bonnie being up there kind of makes a lot of sense to me. I think she's the premier defensive leader right now. Um, Whatever that means, but you know, she gets to bunker up. She has so many defensive options as far as being able to tap down your characters. She can rest your blockers. Once Kid is on the board, becomes pretty difficult to actually get through that wall. And with some of the anti-removal stuff, you can't run things like Mole Pistol and just be completely fine. Bonnie is a bit slow, so that's where this becomes more playable than it is a dodge these, because if Bonnie doesn't see her stuff when she needs them, she could really fold like a piece of paper, which does happen because she can miss searches and stuff like that. So, or just always pull 2Ks. You know, she's unreliable in that way, where I think you can maybe squeak out 40% of your games, which is why I put her at around this. You also have access to Hody Jones, which is really good because you get to tap down 2 blockers and rest them, so you can actually swing into the Kid. The nice thing is all your bodies are 7k, right? So when Kid is on the board and you play out Hody, let's say you're at 10, you can actually swing 888. Oh, sorry, 8888 if you have 2 bodies already on board with Hody. Which is very powerful and will burn a lot of cards out of Bonnie's hands, which I think is very important for the matchup. If you can somehow get through Kid and burn a bunch of cards while you're doing it, that's how you win that matchup. Next we have Lim. Lim is just a difficult matchup purely because if Lim sees Whitebeard and Sakazuki on curve, can be very deadly, will slow you down a lot, and then Lim gets to set up a bunch of bodies, and then it's, okay, can I somehow break through the fortress of Doflamingo blockers to be able to reach this Lim's face, is basically what you're looking at. The nice thing is, I know some Lims are going a little bit more slow in this meta, where they're running things like the 9-drop Zoro, and this will be a common theme with GP as well. So since we run Ezo, if you don't know what Ezo does, gives minus 2,000 for the turn if you pitch a card. That actually persists through restands since it's for the turn. So 9-drop Zoro actually becomes just a permanent 7k for the turn, which is actually, you know, beneficial because remember what I said. Your leader is a 6k, so if you just pitch a 2k on a 7k swing, it's actually pretty, you know, it's pretty fine. You're actually you're not sweating that much, so it's actually pretty nice. That's where the matchup I think is kind of okay. Your swing's still pretty big, and Lim can miss her curve pretty hard because her curve is so rigorous, right? You want to see your NL on your second body. You want to see maybe your Sabo on your first, you know, things like that. Like, it is not that consistent, and that's where the weaknesses really lie. Next, we have Katakuri and Kid. So these two are kind of like the yellow. I don't even know how to call it. There's the defensive yellow, and then there's aggro yellow. Both of these are pretty good at bunkering a little bit, but at the same time threaten life with some bigger bodies. Kid's obviously more defensive flavor since you're preventing swings with blockers. Hey, kind of difficult. This matchup very reliant on getting Hody Jones. Katakuri, less reliant on Hody Jones. You need to see your curve. If you don't see your curve, it's a little bit more difficult. And then he's going to start burning your life and regaining life. Oden can run out of steams and cards. And since Katakuri's swinging 7 with leader ability, you will have to just burn 2Ks pretty often. So, and he could also swing into your bodies too. So, you know, 7 into 7 is definitely something that you're going to have to watch out for. So these two I just put in here. I think it's just difficult. Yellow is just in general a harder color because it's more controlling and has access to good 5-drop removal. Next we have ST14 Luffy. This one is a black deck, so of course it's gonna have the traditional difficult black stuff. But this one, I'd say it's his main benefit as a leader is that he becomes a 6k. But Oden really doesn't care that you're a 6k, and his removal is less consistent than these 3 up here. So just purely based off that fact, I think it's an easier matchup, and I've played it a couple times. I haven't had nearly as much difficulty as Lucci or Smoker, for sure. It is a little bit interesting late game where, okay, we both have some pretty decently sized bodies, and it's like, okay, do we go face? Do we go board? But I think it's definitely easier than these, so I put it a tier below. Next we have Doflamingo, which I think the reason why Oden wasn't so successful in Japan for EB02 meta was that Doflamingo with Jinbei was definitely controlling enough to be difficult for Oden. You have enough bodies, you have enough things to swing 7 that you can definitely drain all of Oden's cards, and then it just becomes a slogfest with, if you get a one good Grav Blade as Doflamingo, oh, game's over. But since Doflamingo has just pretty much been gone for the most part, there actually is not that many times I'm kind of like, okay, well, I'm not as worried, you know? If Doflamingo was in the meta, I don't know if I would be playing Oden. I'm not going to lie, because he has some difficulties with that matchup. I know previously people would be teching in stuff like Ryuma, which KO's arrested 4 cost on play and on KO. So that could remove 2 bodies if your timing and use of this body is good. But still, it's just not the easiest matchup, so that's just gonna go into playable. Purple Black Luffy is a matchup that I personally have difficulties with, but apparently other Oden players don't really care about it that much. You go second, you slam face. I just haven't really been. I don't know if the Purple Black Luffy is high rolling or I'm just low rolling every time I play into it, but I just don't have a consistent way to beat this deck before the 10 drop Luffy comes down, and then I have problems because there's a 12k body swinging at me. So there's definitely some nuance here that I still need to learn, so maybe that's something I just grind up, but I'm going to currently put it at 40-60 just for myself. Next we have Bello Betty. Bello Betty is a tricky matchup just because you could really try and control her because you have so many rush bodies that you can start taking her board away, which I think is definitely the game plan. You don't really want to be swinging at her as much, but since all your bodies are pretty tall, you actually have a lot of swinging power to get rid of a lot of Bello Betty's threats. The only difficulty is when you do try and go for lethal, some of these triggers can really mess you up. And since Oden's kind of fragile sometimes, it could be kind of scary to swing into life if she has 4. So you really need to take it like one step at a time, one body at a time, and try and really grind out Bello Betty. But sometimes you're just going to lose because the high roll is just that good. So I'm going to put her at 40-60, a little bit different than Zoro, which I think Zoro is a little more even, where it's actually kind of coin flippy. Whereas Bello Betty, I don't think is as coin flippy, but it's just a little more difficult because of triggers. And she gets to swing 7 a little bit easier than Zoro gets to swing 7 because of the plus 3k. So if she wants to, she can kind of starve you out of resources herself. So it's a pretty interesting matchup. I think I need to have some more reps in on this one, though. Next one we have even / coin flip. So Shanks, one of the dominant ones in the meta currently, I think is about 50-50. Especially with him going a little more of that controlling build. You can really knock him down pretty quick if you are able to see all your rush pieces. Him doing minus 1k doesn't really matter since Oden's a 7. So yeah, if Shanks doesn't see 2ks, this matchup could be very rough for him. Now, if he sees the counter at the right times, if he sees his curve on time, if he sees, 10 drop Shanks on curve, pretty difficult. Straight up, pretty difficult. But I still think it's about 50-50, where if both the players are equally skilled, it could go either way depending on the draw. So I put that truly at 50-50. Next we have Vegapunk, kind of similar to Bello Betty, floods a lot of bodies. You can really starve him in hand once you start killing board, but some of these lethal situations you have to kind of go for sometimes when Vegapunk has a lot of bodies on board and you've kind of been taking these like 6 or 7Ks throughout the game, and eventually you're down to like 1 or 2 life and maybe he can threaten lethal. That's where it gets tricky, where it's like, okay, the decision making really has to kick in, and what is his triggers? If it's the event, a good freaking luck. If it's Shaka, okay, that's pretty tough too. There's just a lot of scenarios where Vegapunk can get out of some unorthodox stuff, and it isn't as easy as I think it should, like it theoretically plays out in my mind. But 50-50 is where I'm going to keep it, just because I think Oden should win if there isn't a trigger that's good. Which I'd say he has about 20 good triggers and 30 meh triggers. So if he sees one of the 30, we're good. If he sees one of the 20, ooh, rough. Okay. Next we have Zoro. This one is pretty coin flippy. You wanna actually hit If you go second, you have a much better chance because he doesn't get to go double shut up and come with us, and he doesn't also get to do book chopper into attach 1 Dawn onto leader and then swing with whatever he played out for 2 Dawn. So definitely interesting matchup that I definitely need more reps in, but I'm gonna put it at coin flip. Same for RP Luffy. I think it's pretty coin flip. If you go second, you kind of get rid of his really strong curve to play out on 7. And this deck does just brick sometimes, so RP Luffy just ends up being kind of even, and you could really rush down his life, and since you have access to Hody Jones to tap down Dawn, and you're swinging 7s all the time, being a 6k doesn't matter that much. He runs out of counter. He doesn't have good card draw, so I think it's about 50-50, but obviously if he gets to the point where he's playing out Lin-Lins, if he's playing out things like 10-drop Shanks or Rayleigh, it could be kind of difficult. It really depends, and this list is extremely customizable. That's kind of what makes RP Luffy interesting, so I keep it at 50-50 just because some of these tech options can really screw you up as Oden. Next, we got Purple Luffy. If he sees his perfect curve, if he goes... This is an interesting matchup, right? Because Oden wants to go second, Purple Luffy wants to go first. I think still going second as Oden is maybe better. I tried taking away first from a Purple Luffy, and I lost by 1k counter. Because he just had so many cards in hand from going second. It's a tough matchup. It's very interesting where you're trying to force down this Purple Luffy, but he's hoarding a shit ton of cards, and you can't really do too much about it. And when he starts playing 7, 8, 9,000 power bodies, it could get kind of difficult to remove them, and where it's now just a race, and he has access to Gum Gum Giant in a race. So it becomes pretty interesting, but I still think it's 50-50. As I said, I lost by 1k counter the other day. Can be just changed by a couple variables there just to, give me that victory. So in that way, I think it's pretty 50-50, where you're both trying to high roll. Whoever high rolls more will win the matchup. Next, we got Calgara. Calgara kind of wants to do the same shit Oden's doing. Cheating out 7k bodies, or, 6, 7k bodies constantly. And swinging pretty large, like a bunch of 7s, or swinging a bunch of 8s, stuff like that. And I think just the fact that Oden doesn't have to burn a life is definitely the only reason I put this at 50-50, because otherwise I think Calgara being able to heal with Noland is definitely a little scary. This will change once OP12 comes out, but luckily we're not there yet. So Calgara is just going to be sitting at that 50-50 mark since we're doing about the same thing, and I think it really is pilot dependent and what you see dependent. Next we have Marco, so another one of these controlling decks. Similar to Shanks, really. I just think he runs out of steam. Now, he could control us a little bit more than Shanks can, even with that minus 2k from leader ability. The only issue is Marco is a 4-life leader, so he doesn't have that extra card in hand to actually be able to counter out of things. So you can actually blitz down Marco, and he can't really do too much about it sometimes if he doesn't see his perfect new gate into Rayleigh, into anything else that he ends up playing for his top end. Next, we got Nami. I have not played this matchup enough. I'm going to be completely straightforward. I have not played this matchup enough. I'm going to put the respect on Nami's name that she's at least 50-50. But theoretically, Oden has everything you need to be able to beat Nami, because you could swing 8, 8, 8, 8, 8. And you could put out a bunch of bodies that she can't really answer well. She can actually Nojiko them, I believe, because it returns a 5 cost. So that's actually pretty good, but if you get your Yamatos out, she doesn't really have a good response, and if you could get a couple of those on board and swing a ton of 9s, that could be pretty deadly for her, where she just runs out of resources. So I could see it being actually winning, but I'm just going to be conservative and put it at 50-50, because I have no idea. Next we got GP Luffy. I think I'll talk about him more in a bit, but basically the entire deck is built around beating GP Luffy. So I'm just gonna put it at winning. I don't think it's that much winning. I think it's about 55-45, where it's gonna require some skill. I don't think the GP Luffy... It's not one of those matchups where the GP Luffy is gonna screw up, and that's what's gonna give you the win. It's a matchup where you can outplay the GP Luffy and win. It's very decision heavy. You need to look a couple turns ahead at what your Dawn allocation is going to be and what Dawn they're going to be at, and can they find lethal in a couple turns. These are all variables you need to account for, especially playing into GP Luffy, just because he has such unique lethal opportunities with stuff like Sanji Pudding restanding Dawn, as well as the Secret Luffy being able to restand itself, which once again you can EZO minus 2k for the entire turn. And you really kind of need to bait the Luffy into kind of over aggroing into you, which is easier said than done sometimes. So you'll have to see. That's a tough matchup, but I think it's still winning for Oden, especially with a list like mine. Next we have Martial D Teach, which I just think this is maybe one of Blackbeard's worst matchups. And it's Oden's best matchup. You want to see Teach 100% of the time. You do not care at all about Teach. If you could get a Denjiro on board, if you could get a Yamato on board, if you could get your Hody Jones, because they're going to be disabling on plays, and then you can just Hody Jones for free. You could also get Dragon. Okay, it's just still a 9k rush body. Pretty solid. Yeah, it's just a tough matchup for Teach. You also have access to Rosinante as a blocker, so you can actually keep your rested bodies alive, so he can't just swing like 10 into them by attaching a ton of Dawn to leader and then playing out a blocker like a Vasco shot. It's a difficult matchup for Teach, and I don't think it's gonna get any easier. Usopp, I think, just too slow. He can't control fast enough for stuff like 5k on, a 7k body on 4 or 5 Dawn turns. It's too big, too fast, and because you have rush, it doesn't matter that he's removing your characters every turn. You just get to swing so many times. He will run out of resources, and most likely the resources he's gonna run out of is life. So yeah, Boa Hancock, she just hates playing against decks that have rush in general, just because she's trying to remove one body a turn, right? Okay, well that body just swung 9k and then you removed it. The damage from the 9k is not going away. So I think pretty tough matchup for Boa, understandably. Buggy, I think, just wait for the starter deck. Just wait for the starter deck. Next we have Smoker. The very interesting matchup. Smoker, Oden into Smoker, I think, is definitely Oden favored. But if Smoker sees Perfect Curve with stuff like Toshigi on 3, Smoker on 5, blocker plus swinging one on 7, and then Kid on 9, you're going to lose the game. Probably you're going to lose the game. But that is a very specific sequence of cards that you just can't anticipate Smoker to have. So in general, Smoker will run out of cards and will be susceptible to just dying straight up. So in that way, I think Oden just has a good matchup. But as I said, if Smoker super high rolls and gets everything that they want, good luck. Reiju just cannot handle the fact that you're a 6k leader. She has a lot of 5k bodies, the Porsche, the Reiju. If they're still playing Niji, it is a 6, so you just need to go 1k over. So it's just a little bit more difficult. Yes, you can go Ichiji, swing 7 into 5 on any of your 7k bodies, but it's just kind of awkward, and Reiju's kind of fragile. She will have max like 8 cards in hand because she wants to be getting stuff back from her Reiju character ability. So it's kind of interesting. I think it's just a little bit too tall too quickly for Reiju, so I'm just going to put that as winning. All right. Long explanation here for the matchup table, but it should be a lot more quick now that we've gone through it all. So why did I pick Oden? Well, here we go. This is exactly why. This chart right here kind of sums it up for me. I think he beats GP Luffy and Blackbeard, and then has a 50-50 matchup into Shanks and Bonnie. I didn't show Bonnie here, but I think he has about a 50-50 into Bonnie. Yeah, it's a little bit worse, but that's playable, okay? So the only real matchup he loses is Lucci. And if the only matchup you're losing out of the top 5 leaders is Lucci, I think you're in a good spot in the current state of the meta, considering how wide the format is. Okay, you dodge a bunch of black decks on the day, you will do pretty good, I think. So that's why I chose Oden. Right here, this is the kind of stuff. Because initially when I thought of the EB02 meta, I thought, okay, this is going to be a triangle format where GP Luffy beats Teach, Teach beats Shanks, Shanks beats GP Luffy. And it's going to be this big triangle, And Oden can tear apart 2 of the parts of the triangle and go 50-50 with the last one. If that's how the meta was, freaking perfect. That's a great stand for Oden. Obviously, Blackbeard maybe a little bit of of a fraudulent pick here in the top 3. I think Lucci's generally a little bit better right now than Teach. But still, you're seeing good results from Teach. I think he got top 4 at a Treasure Cup yesterday. So definitely still seeing some good results. But either way, this is kind of my rationale here for why I chose Oden. So now, into the thing that everybody wants to see. 30 minutes into the video, we got the deck list here for Oden. Okay, I'm going to first show it. We're going to go through what I chose, some alternates, and then we're going to come back to the list. But this is the first appearance of it. I have not shown this pretty much to anyone. It's what I built personally for myself. And the ratios are super custom. It's kind of exactly what I want out of Oden. So, going through it quickly, we got 13 2Ks, and then the rest are mostly 1K counters. I mean, it says 25 bricks, but remember, Oden's leader ability does allow you to pitch out these bricks, so the Izo, the Denjiro, and the Yamato, for 1K counter each. So these aren't even bricks, these 16 cards here, or sorry, 12 cards here, and then also we got some rad beams at the bottom. Besides that, you could see my top end is Hody Jones plus Dragon. A little bit light, I'd say, on top end, but you'll see why. I think the rationale will make sense when you look at the card down here. And then on top of that, you know, you have your standard searchers. You have Rosinante for protection and Luffy as a one-of, which I'll talk about in a little bit. The spicy pick here is obviously my 2K Tony Chopper, but it has good synergy with other stuff on this table. This is the list. You guys could copy it, play with it. I don't mind. Change the ratios around, but let's just get into what my thinking is for all these cards and how I landed on this kind of list. If you notice here, I have 13 2K, so I'm going 3 Otama, 2 Tony Choppers, 4 Yamatos, and then that's it. Oh, sorry, no, excuse me, Izos as well. Izo is also a pretty important card since it does rest 4-cost blockers. That's pretty good. All right, so going straight into these picks, we're going to start with the early game since we're going to go kind of along what the curve of Oden is. What's your game plan? This is me I'm going to break down the game plan now. So, turn 1, if you're going second, either Rosinante or Momonosuke is what you want to see, okay? Momonosuke obviously is a recurring searcher. So, in my mind, whenever I think of these resting searchers, think of a pseudo blocker, because they have to swing into that. If they don't swing into that, you get to keep drawing cards, and it is a nightmare for whoever you're playing against. Because Oden's biggest issue is if he runs out of cards. Well, if you don't swing into this Momonosuke, I'm going to keep drawing cards. So you better freaking swing into it. But if they don't swing into it, and they swing into life, yeah, you burn 1 card for the counter. But, you know, now you get to constantly have the option of pulling more cards when you need them. Very, very solid here. Obviously, Rosinante, very self-explanatory. It can protect rested characters from being KO'd. It can also protect rested characters from losing in battle after it's been rested. So if Rosinante gets rested, you can actually still trash the Rosinante instead if it was to lose a battle in KO. And then the last option is obviously Otama. I think Otama is when you're freaking desperate as all hell. Or when you have your Izo in hand. If you have Izo in hand, but you don't have either of these two, I would highly suggest going Otama to try and find Hiyori. Because if you can find Hiyori, you're chilling. If not, just take the Denjiro and move on with your day. You can also pull out Momonosuke if you get absolutely nothing out of Otama. It is a 2K. It doesn't have a body, which is a little bit annoying because you can't really swing into some of these rest-affected characters with it. But, you know, it doesn't matter that much. Just note you are using a 2K to search, so that's 1 less 2K you will have in your deck, and they're going to know that too. Alright, here's the bread and butter of the deck. This is what makes it all work. Kozuki Hiyori, if you don't know what this character does, you could play it out for 4 Dawn. You may trash this character, play up to 1 Land of Wano type character card with a cost of 5 or less other than Hiyori from your hand. Then draw 1 card. Here's the combo. You literally just Hiyori into Denjiro or Izo. Okay, if you're going second, which is obviously the optimal curve, you're going to be wanting to play out Hiyori on 4 into Izo. That's just what you want to do. Because Izo will then attach Arrested Dawn, and since Izo is a 5-cost Land of Wano character, Oden's leader ability activates, and you are suddenly swinging 7 on your first turn, and you just played out a 5-cost 7,000 power body. Very powerful, and it has defensive capabilities with this on your opponent's deck. If you don't know what it does, you can trash a card, and then you can, if your leader has the Land of Wano type, give up to one of your opponent's leader or character cards minus 2k. So it's effectively a 2k counter, whatever card you want to pitch. Now, what's cool is this pertains throughout the turn, so any restand effects will not, you'll still have to swing that much over just to be able to get those hits through. Now, if you're going first, I actually really advocate for the idea of on 5 Dawn, you play out Hiyori into Denjiro, and then attach 1 Dawn yourself. I think that's actually stronger than Izo on if you're going first. Just because Denjiro, very strong card. He needs setup time, though. Because he doesn't attach a Dawn himself, he's actually kind of slower than Izo. But when you would get a Denjiro to stick on board, my god, you are playing a different game completely. I would very, very highly prioritize protecting Denjiro if you're able to get him past his first turn. If he's not getting removed on play, oh, you're swell. Because then on 7, if you really want to be an asshole, you can go Hody Jones. You can't go Hody Jones. You go Yamato 6. For 6, attach a Dawn to Denjiro. Swing for 8. Then you restand 2 Dawn. You attach the Dawn from the Yamato onto your leader. Swing 8 with Yamato. Swing 8 with your leader. You're swinging 8 3 times on turn. Your third swinging turn. Very powerful combo. Cannot be understated. Denjiro sometimes is goated. Keyword, sometimes. I think he's more situational than Izo, but still very important for the deck. Alright, next we have our 3 engines. If you haven't played other games, I think engines are generally things that enable your deck, right? They're also called enablers, but for me, these are my 3 engine cards. Obviously, Yamato, the new one from EB02, is extremely good because it also gains Rush. So you attach 1 Rested Dawn to your leader, and you gain Rush, and it's activate main. So you could do that every single turn. You get to attach 1 Dawn every single turn. Very powerful effect. So obviously on 6 Dawn, if you're going second, you just play this out, swing 7, swing 7. And if you have another body that you played out from your Hiyori last turn, you swing 7, you swing 7, you swing 7. Okay, it's either they're taking 2. Usually this is how it plays out. People will take 2 of it and then counter out of 1. Okay, that means that if they take the 2 and then counter out of 1, if they're not a 6k leader, that means they are burning the 2 equivalent of the 2 cards they pulled from life. That is a very good thing. So Yamato really enables this deck. Next you have Yamato, the 2k counter. Now, I know some people don't play this card, and I think it's a mistake not to, because this is what enables the deck to be consistent. This Yamato attaches a Dawn to your leader or one of your characters. You could attach a Dawn to Denjiro. That's a pretty solid look there. But in general, you just need the option sometimes to have a 5-cost Land of Wano character on your board, and I think this is the best one just because it is a 2k. Like most games, I don't have to play this out. I'm just holding it for a 2k. But when you really need it, sometimes this card is necessary, and I don't think it's worthwhile to drop it for a different 2k because of how powerful the option of being able to use this is. Then we have Luffy. I've actually dropped it down to 1, if you remember my deck list from just a couple minutes ago. Well, I guess now like about 10 minutes ago. I just think it's too situational. He's good, don't get me wrong, but you need to have a Wano character established on board already, and he is only a 6,000 power character compared to the 7,000 of Yamato, so I just think he's a little more situational. Some matchups where you get Luffy, it's actually pretty nice because you get to get another rush body at a moment when maybe your opponent's not anticipating it, and then when you're at 10 Dawn, you could actually do like rush Luffy plus another 5-cost body. Very powerful. So I just think there's a lot of flexibility with the card, but I don't need to see it in most 95% of my matchups. So generally I don't think it's worth it. And it's also not searchable by any way, and you cannot pitch it for leader ability either, since it's not Land of Wano. So in general, I always just recommend either reducing its number down to 2 or 1 or 0. Your choice. Obviously, this deck is highly customized to myself, and that's just the conclusion I reached. Alright, top end. This is a discussion. I think everyone knows you need to play some number of Hody Jones greater than 2. Whether you play 3, whether you play 4, it does not matter. You need to play Hody Jones. Does not matter. You need to rest. The ability, even if you don't see it in the game, the ability to be able to tap down Dawn is crucial. And that's what makes this deck meta, in my opinion, is that you have access to Hody Jones. If you didn't have access to this card, completely different game. Now, I will say Hody Jones obviously takes a life. You're a 4-life leader. That's scary. I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters most matchups. I think Hody Jones, in general, you're either doing it from a position where you have to go for lethal, or you're doing it from a position where you can really extend your advantage. So, in those scenarios, Hody Jones, the downside does not matter. Play this card. I don't think I have to speak too much on it. Being able to tap down a blocker and 1 Dawn, very powerful. Next, we have Monkey D. Dragon. I ended up running 2 in my deck. Dragon is a little bit more for the tougher matchups where you need a bigger body to either swing bigger into characters or to have stick because they have cost removal. So, for instance, into Lucci, I do want to see Dragon on curve. I do. Bigger body means he has to commit more Dawn to actually be able to remove it, and it does have Rush. And since it gives a rested Dawn to your leader, you know, it means that you can actually, if you have another 5-cost body on board, you can activate your leader ability just off of this Dragon getting played. Very powerful. Highly recommend this card. I like it a lot. Next, we have Whitebeard. So this is a card I've been kind of grappling with whether I want to play it. I don't play it currently. I don't think I'll play it for the rest of this set. But I think it's a good option for next meta potentially because of how heavy Lin presence is going to be because of Blue-Purple Luffy. Blue-Purple Luffy abuses the hell out of Lin's 6-cost removal, and guess what? If you look back at our last slide, 6 cost, 5 cost, 5 cost, 4 cost, 5 cost, 5 cost. Everything is removable by Lin, and that's your bread and butter. So you're going to need to look for alternate win conditions, and I think Whitebeard is a good alternate win condition. On the turn it's played, you gain 2,000 power defensively. That's incredible. That is incredible. Just as an effect, straight up. So you'll end up being an 8,000 power leader if you would also have a body on board. 8,000 power, that's almost Black Yellow Luffy levels of survivability. And then on top of that, Dawn times 2 when attacking you would KO a 3,000 power or less. Now, you combo this with something like Rayleigh, I could see the spice. Rayleigh decreases something by minus 3k, you get to KO something. You basically get to KO 6,000 power bodies. What's not to love? I think that's pretty interesting. But that's neither here nor there since I don't run him. I don't run him at all. I just think he's too slow. Goes against the identity of what the deck's trying to do in this current meta. So with that, I don't have him in the deck. Alright, my tech options. So this is obviously the highly customized stuff. I'm going to start off with what I did include and then some alternates that you can actually tech into your own decks if you want to. Alright. So this is kind of the linchpin of my deck. These 2 copies of the Peak. I run 2 of, and that kind of influenced my decision on these 2 cards on the right here. So I have Gum Gum Mole Pistol and Tony Chopper. So Gum Gum Mole Pistol, obviously extremely good into Sanji Pudding. That is an immediate removal. Minus 5k, and then 2,000 power or less. That KOs a Sanji Pudding immediately, and it won me a game again today into a GP Luffy. So just know this is a very powerful effect. And since every one of your bodies are above 6,000 power, you pretty much always have this KO effect in play. Very powerful card. Highly recommend. I think it's better than Luna, which you'll see on the next slide. Then we have Tony Chopper. So I wanted some way of having a searchable 2K from the Peak because right now, like, as it stood, I had no searchable 2Ks. In case I really needed one, I needed it. And then on top of that, GP Luffy has a unique weakness to blockers. Yes, he could tap them down with stuff like Usohachi and Zoro, but because generally, at the stage of the game where you're playing out some of these blockers, GP Luffy won't have the Dawn to spare to be able to also rest down blockers. He'll just have to go through them. A lot of the times, just having the extra blocker is good. And this is a 6,000 power blocker. So, you know, it does avoid some pretty hairy stuff. And you can also protect stuff like Rosinante. So, like, if you have both a chopper and a Rosinante on board, you can protect the Rosinante pretty easily with this chopper. It's just a pretty interesting kind of feedback loop. And I think with the peak being able to search any 4 cost or more, guess what? That means your top end, you could search out Hody Jones. I really, really, really recommend this card. Please play it. I'm honestly considering upping how many I'm running, because also on trigger, it just plays the effect, which is you search the top 4. And also because, you know, if you looked at the curve, you have 4 Dawn, 6 Dawn, 8 Dawn. You have stuff to play. Well, if you just rear that back a little bit, you can go 6 Dawn, 8 Dawn, 10 Dawn, with the peak being able to fit into any of those slots. Just a thought that there is room for it. And obviously, the other option is to have Rosinante, which I had in the earlier section, for blocker. So you could either play the peak or Rosinante and 2 Dawn, or you could play a Momonosuke Searcher. So there's just some good options and flexibility with what you can do in one turn. But I think the peak is very good. You can also run obviously We Are. I just prefer the peak just because it's Wano themed and this song is goated. Yeah. Either way, these are my tech options. Highly recommend. Next, we have some alternates. So there's 2 identities here. Luna, I think, is the other option of running besides running Mole Pistol, because you could freeze all 7 costs. I just think there's a lot of times where, because GP Luffy kind of can survive things in an interesting position because of Gum Gum Giant, I'm kind of scared to Luna things because I know that the clapback is gonna freaking hurt, okay? Because removing something permanently and forcing Luffy to have to play out another Sanji Pudding if they want the same amount of value from leader ability, versus Electrical Luna where, okay, for one turn defensively, they cannot swing. Unless I could kill them on the next turn, that is not freaking worth it. That is not worth it. I think there's some interesting ideas with it. If you find I think if with Whitebeard, it could be pretty interesting, where you can Luna and then Whitebeard the next turn. Because if you Whitebeard, then now you're an 8. So now them all restanding is not as impactful of a feeling. So definitely some ideas there. Alright, and then we move on to a kind of alternate reality Oden, where you're running a little bit more removal. Then I would drop all my 1 cost green Otamas for my 1 cost red Otamas to be able to do minus 2,000. Because then what you can do on 9 Dawn or 10 Dawn, you can do Rayleigh and Otama and KO a Sanji Pudding, and then also give one minus 3,000. That's pretty good. You get to get rid of a Sanji Pudding and maybe something else as well. You know, it's just a powerful combo. I think if I was to run Rayleigh, I would run this red Otama instead. But since I don't run either of these, and they are unused. There was an idea of me running 2 red Otamas and 2 green Otamas, but I just think the green Otama offers more for the current state of Oden. Alright, more alternates. Monet is an alternate engine card. Remember how I said engines are the ones that kind of allow you to play the game the way you want to play them? Well, this card does exactly that. It gives you 2 Rested Dawn cards to your leader or one of your characters, and it's 2 Dawn, so it's another flexible number. Something that you can do instead of Rosinante or the Peak or your Momonosuke searching. And then you give Rested Dawn to your leader or characters. So you get to activate your leader ability off of it. And then you also give minus 1k during this turn, which also can synergize with Rayleigh if you're going to play that as well. But the choice is yours, because you could go minus 1k, minus 3k, and then pop the 3k. So you're targeting 7,000 power characters like Sanji Pudding. Definitely a good idea there. I think Monet is a pretty interesting pick. I have not played with it that much, but I think I could see the vision. Now, it is not searchable, so you'll have to play a higher number of copies for this to be really a key part of your deck. Alright, next we got Ryuma, which really is... This card was much more prevalent in Oden pre-EB02, and I think in Japan as well, because this... Obviously, you read this effect, this is anti-Dofi as hell. This is anti-Dofi as hell. It's on play, KO 1 rested character, cost of 4 or less. What does Dofi do? He plays out rested 4 costs. Okay, cool. You play out Ryuma, you KO. If they want to clap back at it, they can, or they can bounce it back to hand, and then you get to KO something again. So, more likely than not, it's just a sticky body 6k that you're swinging at Doflamingo every turn. Very good card. Pretty useful. Definitely recommend if you're seeing a ton of Dofi in your area. Alright, last one is Kid. Don't play Kid. I mean, you could. Okay, don't get me wrong. I could see a vision playing it 1 or 2 of, because it wins you some of these matchups where people are playing low to the ground. So like Bello Betty and Zoro, I'm sure get much easier as soon as you Tekken Eustace Captain Kid. But is it worth it though? At the very least, you have Izo to be able to pitch this as a brick. So that's the nice thing. But if you don't see Izo, or they remove Izo very quickly, Kid suddenly is a brick in hand, and you're gonna have to play it out at some point. And you're going to need the extra Dawn. So, like, if you're angling a Kid deck, I would highly recommend running this Yamato as your engine, because then you get to attach the Dawn for free later. Just a thought, though. A little bit interesting. You do get to protect your bodies, which I think is pretty nice. And then since you're already running Rosinante, it's a pretty easy slot in. You could run Tashigi as well, but I don't think it's worth it at that point. You're just indexing a little bit too hard into that package. Alright, and then we're back to the list. This is where I landed. After all that discussion and all that rationale, I ended up with 1 Luffy, 3 Radical Beams, and 2 Mole Guns. So that's like kind of like... This is my spice, okay? You could play the deck. You could say it's good or bad. I don't know. I'm honestly taking feedback, so please let me know in the comments below. I know this was a little bit of a longer video, but that's pretty much all I got for today. As far as this is concerned. So thanks for watching and sticking around with me for about 50 minutes as I yap about this leader. Shout outs to all my opponents in these last couple weeks for Treasure Cups. I think they were all super cool. And I learned a lot from pretty much every single interaction, even though, you know, I ended up winning my first one and then getting second in the next, but I still appreciate all the things I've learned in the last couple weeks. So yeah, either way, like, I know there's a highly anticipated video, so I'm going to be putting this out with a tweet as well, so please check me out on Twitter, but that's just so you can get more down-to-the-ground updates, whereas this is more of a big, overarching update, more than anything. On top of that, please like and subscribe if you thought this video was interesting in any way, shape, or form, and I hope you get your dubs with our boy Oden, you know. It's pretty rare for me to really invest in a leader that I think is actually really strong. Surprisingly, you know, I previously played Reiju, Katakuri, Sugar, and Robin. And while I liked all those decks, I do think they had their flaws. I think Reiju may be the most solid of that group, of course, but I think her matchup spread right now is bad. So having Oden be something I kind of peeled back to, and then guess what? It ended up being the Golden Goose. Honestly, it's a great feeling. So I thank you every single one of you for all your support in the last couple weeks. And I hope this video goes out well. All right. Either way, that's all I got. Enough yapping from me. Golden Gat out.